I moved out to the forest looking for peace. A quiet life away from the constant noise and deadlines of the city. The tall pines stretched endlessly, their needles whispering with every gust of wind, and sunlight painted golden patterns across the forest floor. Every morning I'd wake before dawn, pour coffee into a chipped mug, and step outside to breathe in the crisp air. Birds chirped, squirrels darted across the fallen leaves, and for a moment, it felt like the world had finally slowed down for me. My cabin, small but cozy, sat tucked between towering trees, with a little path leading to a creek that sparkled in the early light. The air smelled of pine, earth, and freedom, and it felt like the kind of place where dreams could quietly take root. I started keeping a journal, scribbling thoughts, and sketching the paths I wandered, capturing a life that seemed impossibly serene. Little did I know, that serenity was about to be shattered by the most controlling neighbor I had ever met. Karen Whitfield arrived in the neighborhood like a storm in high heels, clipboard clutched in her hands like a weapon. She wasn't just a neighbor, she was the HOA president, self-appointed enforcer of rules no one even knew existed. She monitored everything, the angle of fences, the height of shrubbery, the cleanliness of driveways, and apparently even the way the leaves fell. People whispered about her at gatherings, but no one confronted her directly. The fear in their eyes was as sharp as the nails she used to tape up notices of violation. I assumed she would leave me alone, that my little cabin and the forest around it were invisible to her strict oversight. I was wrong. She had a way of finding the tiniest imperfection, a way of turning a harmless act into a violation worth fines and humiliation. I had no idea her attention would fall on me, and when it did, I realized I was about to step into a battle I hadn't expected to fight. The first confrontation happened on an ordinary Tuesday, the kind of day that had started like every other since I moved in. I had been trimming some dead branches near the edge of my property, just trying to clear a path to the creek, when I heard the sharp clack of heels behind me. I froze, recognizing the sound from the stories neighbors had whispered, and turned slowly. Karen was standing there, clipboard in hand, eyes narrowing as she surveyed my property. "Do you have permission to clear these trees?" she demanded, her voice cutting through the morning air. I blinked, unsure if she was serious. "Permission? I own this land," I said, trying to mask my confusion and irritation. She didn't even look at me, only at the branches, shaking her head with a disapproving frown. Her pen scratched across the paper, and in that moment, I understood this wasn't about trees, it was about control. Her presence was suffocating, and I could feel the weight of judgment pressing, down like the shadows of the forest at dusk. "You're in violation of HOA guidelines," she said, pointing at her clipboard with authority that was meant to terrify. "Unauthorized forest clearing. Fine, $500. My stomach twisted, disbelief turning to anger. "This is my property! I just bought this cabin, and the forest belongs to me." I protested, but she simply shook her head, lips curling into a smirk of satisfaction. She didn't care about facts, legality, or fairness. She thrived on intimidation, on making people feel powerless. The first seed of conflict had been planted, and I knew then that my peaceful retreat would no longer be untouched by her relentless oversight. I couldn't yet see how far this battle would go, but I felt it in my gut. Karen had claimed me as her next target, and she wasn't going to let go easily. The following week, I woke up to another notice taped to my cabin door, the paper flapping lightly in the breeze as if mocking me. This time it read, "Excessive leaf collection, $250 fine." I stared at it for several moments, disbelief and frustration building in equal measure. Leaves? Really? I had spent the morning raking fallen pine needles into neat piles, trying to keep my property tidy, and now that effort was turned into a reason to punish me. My hands shook as I crumpled the notice, anger bubbling beneath the surface. Karen wasn't just nitpicking anymore. She was actively inventing offenses, turning my peaceful life into a minefield of imagined violations. Every step outside felt like walking on eggshells, every breath of freedom tainted by the looming threat of her next accusation. I could see the patterns forming. She was relentless, and she thrived on making me feel trapped. I had no choice but to fight back, but first I had to survive her daily attacks. A few days later, Karen appeared at the edge of my property while I was tending a small fire pit, which I had installed to safely burn twigs and branches. "Unauthorized fire pit installation," she shouted, waving her clipboard like a weapon. "Fine, $400. I froze, staring at her as if she had lost her mind. "It's a safe, contained pit, and it's on my land." "You can't just fine me for existing?" I yelled, my voice cracking with both anger and disbelief. She didn't respond, only scribbled furiously, her pen scratching against the paper like nails on a chalkboard. The neighbors walked by silently, some avoiding eye contact, others casting nervous glances, unwilling to intervene. Her reign had made them spectators, and I was the unwilling performer in her cruel theater. Each confrontation left me drained, frustrated, and more determined to find a way to reclaim control. That night, I sat by the cabin window, surrounded by notices and fines, my heart pounding as I went over every violation. I realized Karen's attacks were no longer random. They were strategic, designed to wear me down mentally and financially. Every day brought a new accusation: unauthorized trail expansion, disturbing wildlife balance, improper storage of firewood, each with a penalty meant to intimidate. I started documenting everything, taking photos, recording interactions, and noting times and dates. I needed proof if I was ever going to fight back. And I began researching property law and HOA regulations, uncovering loopholes and inconsistencies that could work in my favor. What I discovered both shocked me and ignited a spark of hope. Much of the forest Karen claimed authority over wasn't technically under HOA jurisdiction at all. The following morning, I confronted Karen verbally for the first time, standing firm on my property line while she paced with her clipboard. "You realize half of this forest isn't even part of the HOA, right?" I asked, trying to gauge her reaction. Her face flickered with surprise, quickly replaced by a mask of authority and condescension. "Rules apply to anyone living near community boundaries," she snapped, her voice tight with barely contained irritation. I felt a flicker of satisfaction knowing I had rattled her, but the tension remained thick. Every word exchanged heightened the stakes, each confrontation more volatile than the last. I knew I needed more than words. I needed a plan, something that would finally turn the tables and strip Karen of the control she had wielded for so long. I spent the next few days gathering every document I could find, old deeds, tax records, and county archives that mapped out the forest's true ownership. Every page I turned felt like uncovering a secret no one had noticed in decades. The more I researched, the more I realized Karen's so-called authority was built entirely on assumptions, intimidation, and fear. The forest wasn't part of the HOA. It had been abandoned, taxes unpaid, ownership unclear for years. My pulse raced as I connected the dots. If I acted fast, I could claim the forest legally, and Karen would have no power left over me. Every obstacle felt surmountable, every risk worth taking. The plan became crystal clear. I wasn't just defending my land anymore. I was about to take control. With a sense of both dread and exhilaration, I filed the paperwork, paid off the back taxes, and secured the official transfer. Holding the deed in my hands for the first time, I felt a rush of victory that I hadn't known in years. The forest was mine, every tree, every winding trail, every hidden glade. I imagined Karen storming in, clipboard ready, and realized for the first time she had no legal leg to stand on. The thought made my lips curl into a quiet, victorious smile. Finally, I had the upper hand. Finally, I wasn't reacting to her whims. I was setting the terms. This was more than a victory. It was liberation, sweet and total. The very next morning, Karen appeared, her heels pounding against the earth as she tried to intimidate me as always. "Unauthorized tree planting," she yelled, waving her clipboard aggressively. Her voice, meant to command and terrify, fell flat against the truth. I stood calmly, reaching into my jacket, and pulled out the deed. "Karen," I said, my voice steady, "I'm not in your HOA. This forest is mine. I'm the new landowner." Her eyes widened, color draining from her face as she read the official documents. She stammered, trying to protest, but the words caught in her throat. For the first time, the woman who had ruled with fear and control was rendered powerless, frozen by the undeniable proof in my hands. Word spread quickly. Neighbors whispered behind her back, some casting furtive glances toward me, others daring to nod with relief. At the next HOA meeting, Karen tried desperately to spin the story, waving her hands and insisting the forest was community property, and that I had acted improperly. I calmly stood and displayed the paperwork for everyone to see. The room shifted instantly. Whispers, gasps, and subtle nods of approval filled the space. Karen's empire of intimidation crumbled before the eyes of her neighbors. I could feel the tension lift as she realized nothing she had ever done would protect her authority here again. The power had shifted completely, and I held the keys. Finally, with the forest legally mine, I set clear boundaries. Only those I permitted could enter the trails or use the creek. Some neighbors approached, nervous but polite, asking for permission to explore or fish. I was deliberate in my choices, rewarding kindness and caution while firmly barring the HOA board members, ensuring Karen could never reclaim control. Watching the shift in dynamics was surreal. The same people who had bowed to Karen now looked at me differently, recognizing the real authority for the first time. And yet, even in that moment of triumph, I felt a shiver of awareness. Karen was smart, proud, and wounded. Somewhere in her house or behind closed doors, she was planning her next move, and I knew this battle was far from over.